Bias and its detriment to the brain by me, Andrew Cooper. So the question I ask myself is, does bias have a large enough effect to a point that makes people, groups, and corporations unreliable? Now, to clarify, we're assuming that this affects not only individual people, but also groups and different organizations. And we're also not referring to a specific group just in general. Now, before we get more into it, I want to explain the two types of bias. The first being cognitive. Now, cognitive bias is a mistake in reasoning, evaluating, memory, and other cognitive processes, likely as a result of holding on to a contrary belief. Now, implicit bias, according to an article from Dr. Pragwa Agarwal, a mental health campaigner, implicit bias was introduced as a new science of unconscious mental processes with a substantial bearing on discrimination law. To sum it up, this is essentially racism. Now, we're going to break it down into two main factors, the first being appearance and the next being relevance. Irene Blair, PhD, according to her article on unconscious bias and health disparities, bias is the evaluation of one group and its members relative to another. She also explains that you can express this directly and indirectly in your words and actions. For example, being directly, you could say simply, I like whites more than Latinos. If you want to be more indirect, you can sit further away from a Latino than you would a white individual. This is all due to one thing, and that would be stereotyping. There are so many small unconscious attributions that would make different genders, races, groups, etc., and many false narratives have been created due to this. Now, Keenan Flager's article titled "The Real Effects of Unconscious Biases in the Workplace" states unconscious biases can stymie diversity, recruiting and retention efforts, and unknowingly shape an organization's culture. This is such a simple but such a huge problem. Now, the biggest factor in which shapes our thoughts and opinions is, shockingly, social media. Now, we're not trying to downplay the idea of social media, as the idea of global communication through a mobile device is revolutionary. However, what we do need to take into consideration is the effect that it puts on our adolescent minds and how it shapes a culture and different organizations. Now, when pertaining to the stimulus materials, Edward Kessler states that the internet and social media are primary authorities for information, with the traditional media a close second. Next, another quote states they can influence actions and decisions such as we hire or promote, how we interact with persons of a particular group, what advice we consider, and how we conduct performance evaluations. Now, the counterclaim, you could say that larger groups have less susceptibility to be influenced by the idea of bias. This is not always the case. In some cases, it might have an opposing effect. At times, it can only make the problem more severe due to many more different opinions that can contradict each other due to different people. Now, this is proven because many giant, very organized corporations, even NASA, have shown an inability to make the correct choices, which could even cost them the lives of others. Now, John Killenly, president of the North Central Ohio chapter, states, if individuals struggle with cognitive biases mentioned, then surely groups of individuals should make better decisions based on a point of opinions. Sadly, this is not always the case. In conclusion, bias does have a large enough effect to a point that makes individuals, groups, and organizations unreliable. And these are what we're excited.
Okay, Andrew, what information did you need before you started researching, and how did that information shape your research?
So definitely some of the information I needed was just generally how you could define it, hence why I put the different types of bias. Now obviously there's other types, but those are the two main ones.
And finally, explain the level of certainty you have about your conclusion, solution, or recommendation.
Well, I'm very certain that my conclusion is correct, not only due to the information that I researched, but also by personal experience.
Thank you.